Indian Horse, the book and the movie. The novel Indian Horse was written by Richard Wagamese and was published by Douglas and McIntyre in 2012. The film Indian Horse was premiered at the 2017 Toronto International Film Festival and was officially released in 2018. Let's start with the setting. The novel Indian Horse shows a strong connection to nature, such as in this quote. It shows how Indigenous culture and appearance are connected back to nature. The novel also displays vivid imagery and has an incredible description of the residential school and Saul's surroundings. In the movie, however, there's a lot of glamorization of St. Jerome's itself, such as in this clip. This scene shows how St. Jerome's was nothing like how it was described in the book, and how it looks like a much better place for children to live. It looks very appealing. In the film, there was also not enough emphasis on Indigenous culture's connection to nature, and there was a lot of inaccuracy around the children's environment around St. Jerome's. For example, in the book, they never played outside, and the random rabbit that was shown. Now let's talk about characterization. In the novel, there's strong character development, which lets us develop a strong connection with each character. There was also a lot of emphasis on Sheila Jack and Saul's sister Rachel, and the two of which were not included in the movie. The book talks a lot about Rebecca and her sister, and also Saul's brother, who were included in the movie, although I don't think their characters were done justice when comparing it to the book. The way that Saul was introduced in the book lets the reader develop a connection with him, and becomes immediately invested in Saul's success. The book also describes the brotherhood between Virgil and Saul, and the fatherhood between Saul and Father Le Boutillier and Saul and Fred Kelly very well. In the movie, however, Virgil seems to be a completely different character than he was in the book, and both Father Le Boutillier and Fred Kelly seem to be more of a mentor to Saul than actually having a fatherly connection with him. The weak character development in the movie and the rushed scenes left little time to develop an emotional connection with any of the characters. There was a false friendship portrayed between Lonnie Rabbit and Saul. In the book, Saul did not have any friends, and it made Saul seem like the bad guy when Lonnie asked him to run away, and Saul said he had to play hockey instead. In the movie, there's only really one character that we can really develop hatred feelings towards, and that's Sister Ignacia. She's the only one who's portrayed in a bad light because she's always showing the rough side of what it's like to be in the residential school. For example, in this clip. Now let's move on to the plot. The book starts at the New Dawn Center where Saul's getting help for his alcoholism. It then moves to where Saul is with his family at God's Lake. His grandmother then dies while trying to move herself and Saul away from God's Lake for the winter. Saul is then taken to St. Jerome's residential school, where he experiences violence and trauma, and eventually Father Le Boutillier comes to teach him how to play hockey, wherein then he endures sexual abuse. Eventually, Saul is adopted by the Kelly family, where he then plays for the Moose team and for the Toronto Marlies. Saul then eventually retires from his hockey career and moves to a lumberjack camp where he experiences harsh racism and discrimination from the white men that he works around. He becomes an alcoholic and then is temporarily saved by Irvin. The beginning of the movie is pretty accurate. It starts at the New Dawn Center. This is the very first scene we see in the movie. This low-shot camera angle zooming in on Saul creates a feeling of vulnerability, which makes sense as he is in a vulnerable setting getting help at the New Dawn Center for his alcoholism. Same as the book, and then moves straight to God's Lake, although I feel some minor details are left out, such as the way Saul's mother feels about having lost both of her older children and when Saul's brother was first taken away. One thing I feel that was done inaccurately was the diner scene. Roll the clip. In this scene in the book, the boys were never laughing, and I think that by changing the way the characters feel about their experience diminishes and minimizes what happened to them. One thing that was done in the movie that I didn't like was the changing of the language, such as when Virgil would call Saul Bambi, which belittles his character and kind of makes him seem weak. Another time that the language was changed was in the beginning when Father Quinn was talking, as we can see here.
Aaron, our goal here is to help you succeed in this world. So you have to.
Changing what Father Quinney said in that scene completely changes the narrative of the goal that the residential school had. In the movie, there was a false scene of Fred Kelly taking Saul to Toronto, which never happened in the book.
Hey, Fred, you take good care of this kid. He's special.
Welcome to Toronto, Saul. It's my wife, Alyssa.
Hi, Saul. First time in.
Another thing that was not included in the movie was the lumberjack camp, and this was very significant in the book. I think that by leaving out certain significant things that Saul experienced in the book kind of changes what people want to put out there when it comes to the film. Let's talk about themes. The themes of the book are family and tradition, cultural genocide, abuse and trauma, racism and prejudice, and transcendence. I feel the movie failed to capture the importance of family and tradition. For example, the haircutting scene. In Ojibwe culture, haircutting is a sign of mourning. This scene just shows Saul getting his haircut and not being happy about it. There's no display of how this connects to Ojibwe culture or how this could be a sign of mourning. I do feel the movie showed an accurate display of the racism and prejudice Saul and his team faced when they were playing against white teams. When it comes to transcendence, I think the movie inaccurately displayed Saul having his visions, especially when it came to when he went back to God's Lake and when he returned to St. Jerome's. Finally, for the endings. The ending of the book, Saul returns to God's Lake and has visions of his family members, his great-grandfather, and the Black Horse. He then returns to the Kellys to talk about his past experiences at the residential school, and they then share theirs. And eventually, Saul plays hockey with Virgil and the community near the end of the book. I was very disappointed with the ending of the movie. Saul kind of returned to God's Lake and saw the rock that was in the beginning of the film, which didn't really mean very much. He didn't have any visions, he just had reoccurring memories, which I talked about in the theme section. And eventually he was just kind of walking around, and that was it. Now for the conclusion. As far as camera angles go, I think the faraway camera angle shots seems like we are observing and not being a part of the action. We're not really intimate with the character, and it also can portray loneliness. If I were to rate the book from 1 to 5, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 5. I think that it was very well written, there was such an emotional connection to each character that I had, and I was invested in Saul's success the whole way through. If I were to rate the movie, I'd give it a 1 out of 5. I wasn't emotionally connected to any of the characters, the ending was a very big letdown, and I didn't feel just any connection to anything. It was kind of just like I was observing people go through the motions. I think the acting wasn't very good, and the overall message that the book was trying to give out was not fully captured in the film. For me, the best scene of the movie was when Saul's grandmother died. I felt it was most accurately portrayed and was the most well done. Another thing I thought that was well done was the Iron Sisters. In the movie, it looked exactly like what I pictured when reading the book. I do feel in the movie many significant parts were removed that should have been included to accentuate the message that Richard Wagamese was trying to perpetuate in the book. The end. Thanks for watching.